Routing a USB differential pair is not just a matter of drawing two lines from A to B. At 480 megabits per second, the copper traces on your PCB behave like transmission lines, and every geometry decision, such as the trace width, spacing, and length, affects whether the signal arrives intact or reflects back and corrupts data. This is part 1 of a two-part series on USB 2.0 signal integrity. Here, we build the physics foundation, why USB uses differential signaling, where the 90 ohm impedance target comes from, and what happens when impedance is mismatched. USB 2.0 defines 3 data rates. Low speed runs at 1.5 megabits per second, and that's for things such as mice, keyboards, and simple HID devices. Full speed runs at 12 megabits per second, and that's the original USB 1.1 target rate. High speed runs at 480 megabits per second, and that's what USB 2.0 added in the year 2000. All 3 modes use the same D+ and D- differential pair. The physical connector and cable are identical. What changes is the speed, and with speed comes radically different signal integrity requirements. Let's have a look at the rise times in this slide. Full speed edges transition in approximately 4 nanoseconds. High-speed edges transition in approximately 500 picoseconds, and that's 8 times faster. That difference is the entire reason that this lecture exists. One clarification that matters specifically for this design is this. The RP2040 microcontroller contains a USB physical layer. It's called PHY or PHY, but it's a USB 1.1 PHY. It supports only low speed and full speed. It doesn't support high speed 480 megabits per second, even though the chip is often described as USB 2.0 capable in marketing. The high-speed path on this board runs entirely through the USB 2244 bridge to the USB-C connector that is used by the storage device. That's the path that demands rigorous signal integrity treatment. USB transmits data using a differential pair. The transmitter drives D+ and D- simultaneously to equal magnitude, opposite polarity voltages. When D+ is high, D- is low, and vice versa. The receiver doesn't measure either line against ground. It measures the difference of the voltage between D+ and minus. A logic 1 is defined as D+ at least 200 millivolts greater than D-. A logic 0 is the opposite. The practical benefit of this becomes clear when noise enters the picture. Imagine a switching regulator nearby, our SY8253 ADC buck converter, for example, injecting electromagnetic interference onto the board. That noise couples onto both D+ and D- in the same direction and by the same amount. It's now a common mode signal. It shifts both lines together, so the difference between them doesn't change. The receiver will just reject this noise. This is called common mode rejection, and it's the core reason USB uses a differential pair rather than a single signal referenced to ground. A differential receiver provides roughly 6 decibels more noise headroom than a single-ended signal at the same swing level, simply because the common mode noise cancels at the subtraction step. The mechanism only works, however, if D+ and D- are routed together and symmetrically. If one trace picks up noise that the other doesn't, then the cancellation breaks down. The differential pair offers a second benefit beyond noise immunity: reduced radiated electromagnetic interference, or EMI. When D+ and D- carry equal and opposite currents simultaneously, the magnetic fields partially cancel each other out in the far field. A tightly routed differential pair radiates significantly less than a single-ended signal carrying the same data. This cancellation depends entirely on symmetry. The 2 traces must be the same length and routed in close proximity. Any length difference between the D+ and D-, called the intra-pair skew, means the signal arrives at the receiver at slightly different times. That timing offset breaks the equal and opposite relationship. A portion of the differential signal energy converts into common mode noise, which the receiver cannot reject. The same common mode noise also radiates as EMI. The USB specification controls cable skew, which is the maximum permitted difference in propagation delay between D+ and D- in the cable, to be 100 picoseconds. On the PCB, the routing must respect the same principle. Length matching between D plus and D minus is not a minor refinement. It's a direct contributor to whether the signal arrives at the receiver correctly and whether the board passes EMI testing. We'll look at exactly how to enforce length matching in KiCad later on. For now, the key point is this. A differential pair must be treated as a single entity, two traces that must be routed together at the same width and with the same length. The USB 2.0 specification sets the differential characteristic impedance of the D plus D minus pair at 90 ohms, with a tolerance of plus or minus 15%. That gives an acceptable range of 76.5 to 103 ohms. The same 90 ohm target applies to the USB cable itself. The alignment is deliberate. The cable and the PCB traces are part of the same signal path. When the signal travels down the cable and arrives at the connector on your board, the PCB traces must present the same impedance the cable has. If they do not, the signal encounters a discontinuity at the connector, and we'll discuss what that discontinuity does in a moment. Each individual trace in the pair has a single-ended impedance of approximately 45 ohms, but the differential impedance of the pair is not simply 2 times 45 ohms. When two traces are routed close together, they couple electromagnetically. That coupling lowers the differential impedance below what you would calculate from each trace in isolation. The relationship is captured in the formula that you see here on the screen. Z-diff equals 2 times Z0 times a correction factor that depends on the ratio spacing to the dielectric height. The practical consequence is that the spacing between D plus and D minus affects the impedance, not just the trace width. You can't tune width and spacing independently. You must adjust them together to hit the 90 ohm target. One common error worth naming is that some engineers apply 50 ohm single-ended rules from RF design to USB traces, and that's incorrect. USB differential impedance is 90 ohms, not 50 ohms, and not 100 ohms, which is the Ethernet differential target. USB, Ethernet, and RF are different standards with different requirements. At low frequencies, a PCB trace behaves like a wire. The voltage is essentially the same at every point along the trace at any given instant. This is the lumped circuit model, as it's called, which is the one used in introductory electronics. That model breaks down when the signal's edge is fast enough that it takes a significant portion of the edge's rise time to travel the length of the trace. At that point, the trace must be treated as a distributed element, which is a transmission line, and that has inductance and capacitance per unit length, and a characteristic impedance which is determined by its geometry. The commonly used threshold is this. Treat a trace as a transmission line when its physical length exceeds 1/10 of the wavelength of the highest significant frequency in the signal. For digital signals, that frequency is not the clock rate. It's derived from the rise time. The approximation is that frequency ni equals 0.5 divided by the rise time. For high-speed USB with a 500 picosecond rise time, the frequency ni is approximately 1 gigahertz. Propagation velocity on FR4 microstrip is approximately 150 picoseconds per inch. At 1/10 of the signal wavelength, the critical trace length works out to approximately 7.6 millimeters. This is a very short distance. On a compact thumb drive PCB, the traces from the USB-C connector to the USB 2244 will almost certainly exceed 7.6 millimeters. Control impedance routing is therefore mandatory on this board. It's not good enough to just say it's short enough to ignore when you're working at 480 megabits per second. For comparison, on the RP2040 full-speed path, the critical length is approximately 170 millimeters, and this means shorter traces on a compact board can arguably be treated casually. The good practice, however, is still to route the RP2040 USB lines as a matched differential pair. Whenever a traveling signal encounters a change in impedance along its path, for example at a connector, a via, a pad, or the load, then a portion of the signal energy reflects back towards the source. This is not a PCB-specific phenomenon. It's a fundamental property of wave propagation. It applies to acoustic waves, light, and electromagnetic signals in conductors equally. The fraction of voltage that reflects is described by the reflection coefficient gamma, defined as Z load minus Z0 divided by Z load plus Z0. When the load impedance equals the line impedance, then gamma is 0, which means no reflection. When the load is an open circuit, then gamma is plus 1. That means that the full signal reflects in the same polarity, producing a voltage doubling at the open end. When the load is a short circuit, then gamma is minus 1, and the full signal reflects inverted. Most real mismatches fall between these two extremes. The reflected wave travels back towards the source. If the source is also mismatched, then it reflects again. The result at the receiver is a superposition of the original signal and multiple reflections, which can be seen on an oscilloscope as overshoot, undershoot, and ringing. If the reflected energy doesn't decay before the next bit begins, then this corrupts the data. At 480 megabits per second, each bit period is only 2.08 nanoseconds. A reflection that hasn't settled within that window will directly affect the next bit. Even a 20% impedance deviation produces a reflection coefficient of approximately 0.09, which is roughly 9% of the incident signal bouncing back. That may sound small, but accumulated across multiple discontinuities in the signal path, it's sufficient to degrade signal quality to the point of failure. Knowing that impedance mismatches cause reflections, the next question is, where do these mismatches actually occur in our design? The USB high-speed signal path runs from the USB 2244 through the copper traces to the USB-C connector. Along that path, there are at least 4 points where impedance continuity is at risk. The connector pins themselves introduce a stub effect and pad capacitance. Pads are wider than the trace, and that width change is a localized impedance drop. The ESD protection arrays are devices placed in the signal path specifically to clamp electrostatic discharge events. Each device adds a small shunt capacitance to the signal line. Shunt capacitance lowers local impedance, and lower local impedance means a reflection. This is precisely why that part was selected for its low capacitance, because minimizing the discontinuity is a design justification for the component choice. The ESD devices must also be placed as close to the connector as possible to keep any stub length short. At the USB 2244 pin itself, the IC pad is again wider than the trace, and the input capacitance of the PHY presents a further load. Each of these discontinuities generates a small reflection. The key insight is that they accumulate. A design that manages each discontinuity individually through careful placement, minimal stub lengths, and consistent traced width arrives at the receiver with a much cleaner signal than one that ignores any of them. Control impedance on the trace between these discontinuities is necessary, but it's not sufficient on its own. The full signal path requires attention at every transition point. Now I'm going to talk about something called the eye diagram. Just for your information, it's not something that we're going to spend any time working on, and I'm not going to do a practical on this, but if you're interested, let me know, and I will look into producing a video that shows you how this works in real life. The standard tool for visualizing USB high-speed signal quality is the eye diagram. An oscilloscope captures hundreds of consecutive bit periods and overlays them on top of each other, time-aligned to a reference clock edge. The resulting pattern looks like a horizontal eye shape. The open area in the center represents the valid sampling window where the receiver reads the bit. A passing USB 2.0 high-speed eye diagram must remain within the mask limits defined by the USB implementer's forum specification. The eye must be open, meaning there must be a clear voltage margin between logic 1 and logic 0, and a clear timing margin around the sampling instant. The USB implementer's forum compliance test measures this directly. When impedance mismatches are present, the reflected waves add and subtract from the incoming signal at different time off points depending on the length of each discontinuity. On the eye diagram, this appears as multiple signal paths overlapping, and the eye essentially closes. Capacitive loading from the ESD protection arrays rounds the edges, compressing the eye both vertically and horizontally. Intra-pair skew shifts one eye boundary relative to the other. A closed eye means the receiver can't reliably distinguish a 1 from a 0. And at that point, the design fails USB compliance testing regardless of whether the schematic is correct. As I said, we're not going to run compliance tests in this course, but this is the physical outcome that every routing decision, say impedance, length matching, ESD placement, to name a few, is ultimately trying to prevent. Let's recap. 4 concepts underpin everything in USB 2.0 signal integrity. First, speed mode determines the constraints. The USB 2244 runs at high speed, 480 megabits per second, 500 picosecond edges. The RP2040 runs at full speed, which is 12 megabits per second and just 4 nanosecond edges. Different requirements, different tolerances. So do not apply the USB 2244 routing rules to the RP2040 lines, and do not apply RP2040 casualness to the USB 2244 lines. Second, differential signaling provides noise immunity through common mode rejection and reduces radiated EMI through field cancellation. Both benefits depend on routing D+ and D- as a matched symmetrical pair. Intra-pair skew degrades both. Third, the USB 2.0 specification requires 90 ohms differential impedance plus or minus 15%. So that's between 76.5 and 103.5 ohms. This target matches the cable impedance. Impedance continuity from the USB 2244 pin to the connector prevents reflections at the cable board interface. And fourth, at 500 picosecond rise times, the critical trace length on FR4 is approximately 7.6 millimeters. Any trace on this board connecting the USB 2244 to the connector is long enough to behave as a transmission line. Impedance match at any discontinuity in that path, such as at the connector, ESD device, via or pad, will generate reflections that degrades signal quality and can close the eye diagram.